Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Hamilton, and I want to welcome you to our panel on the very, very hot, transforming subject of SVOD. And our theme today is the SVOD playing field, thinking local and going global. So we're going to address the tension between providing localized services versus the huge transformative waves represented by the giants Netflix and Amazon. So we have with us today, three very informative experts and participants in the field, Roger, Alexandre, and Hugh. But I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves one by one. First of all, Roger.
Bonjour, good morning. I'm Roger Jackson. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Kinonation. We're based in Santa Monica, California. We are a global super distributor for film and TV. And by super distributor, I simply mean that we have a massive catalog, a little bit more than 15,000 titles right now, movies and TV shows from all over the world in multiple different languages. And we distribute those via a very high-tech system to over 50 VOD platforms all over the planet, from Netflix to Amazon and Hulu in the US to Antenna in Greece, for example, and China Mobile in China. So that's what we do. That's all we do. We're a big fat pipeline from content owners all over the world to consumer-facing video-on-demand VOD platforms all over the world.
So Roger, let's just quickly look at definitions. VOD means video on demand, which means that subscribers individually or consumers individually receive content. So how do you define the various categories of video on demand?
Broadly speaking, there's SVOD, TVOD, and AVOD. Obviously, we're focused today on SVOD, which is subscription video on demand. The best examples of SVOD globally are Netflix and Amazon Prime. It simply means that the consumer pays a flat monthly subscription and he or she gets an all-you-can-eat service, meaning they can consume as much as they want. Then there's TVOD, TVOD, transactional video on demand. A good example, again, globally, would be iTunes, also Vimeo on demand. So this is where the consumer pays a more conventional fee to watch each film or TV show. So usually it's $3 or $4 or $5 on iTunes to watch a movie as a 48-hour rental, or maybe $10 to buy the movie, which these days is essentially an unlimited rental. So that's TVOD. It's a little bit of a dying format in some ways. It's being overwhelmed by SVOD. And then finally...
So just quickly, Apple's missed the boat.
Apple has missed the boat to an extent. I mean, Apple is a closed technical ecosystem, so without an Apple device, you cannot watch iTunes. And obviously, many people have Apple devices, but many people don't. So, the average OTT service on, let's say, a Samsung TV or a Sony TV or an LG TV, by definition, won't give the consumer access to iTunes because they'd have to buy an Apple TV or other Apple device for that.
So AVOD.
AVOD, advertising-supported video on demand. There's nothing new about AVOD, of course. Network television through most of the world for the last 50 years and cable for the last 30 years has had some element of advertising supported. But in the context of VOD, it would be services like Tubi TV, T-U-B-I TV, which is movies and TV shows. It's definitely a strong competitor to Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, certainly in the US, but you don't pay for it. You pay for it by watching a commercial in front of every film, and usually mid-roll commercials too.
So I've got one more VOD for you, FVOD, free VOD.
Free VOD,
PBS.
Yeah, so PBS is an example, and you know, some YouTube content is free VOD, but typically free VOD is, as Peter says, it's content provided by, paid for by some other means. So it's PBS content in the UK. The BBC iPlayer would be considered to be free VOD.
So thanks. You've set the table for us, Roger. Alexandre, tell us, please, about Spicee.
Spicee is a VOD, SVOD platform, because we propose French content for the French audience at the moment, but we're also developing internationally original content, and we have had to hold this a social platform to share with our users and to share the content coming from the community.
What's the price point?
The price point is €9 a month, or €4 for if you're under 25, and as you've seen, our target is a young audience.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it's and then you have a price. If you take a 1-year subscription, you're paying €8.
So how many subscribers do you have now?
We have around 8,000 subscribers. We have something like 50,000 clients now. Because some people are just trying, you can have access to one content for €4. I mean, and then. The whole thing is around, the concept is around not only a premium content, as we are proposing on Spicee, but also what we call Spicers, where we have something like 40,000 members of the community. They are proposing content, and then it's crowdsourcing. And then if the content is appreciated by the community, they give like, and those likes helps us to crowdfund this content. So you have a premium channel or premium experience with Spicee, original content, and then around this newcomers or people who want to be part of that community called
So
Spicers.
you're French language? I noticed a lot of English there.
We are French language so far, but we have an English-speaking platform that we are developing on the parallel. It's accessible to the website. And then we are also discussing about distribution globally. We have plans in India. What's happening is that we have a French partner called Babel Press, and we have journalists all around the world already, in India, in Brazil, in the US. So the plan is obviously to go global, to go back to your question, with this existing content and local content produced by partners. So this is it will be the second phase of what Spicee is about.
Great. So just a final question. How many subscribers do you need to break even, operating break even?
I mean, it depends on the model. I mean, we are engaged in discussions with operators or with, I don't know, different type of distributors, as you can imagine.
So different platforms.
Different platforms and different business models.
Okay.
If we are in a direct distribution, we need something like 30,000 subscribers
30,000
to make even in France. Right. But then the costs are changing. If you go globally, they are the dubbing cost or the subtitling cost. Then you have also the production cost. But the whole thing, the whole model was built to be broadcasted. We think it's a global niche because we know that you have a few people. We call them curious global people who are interested in having original content.
Curious young global people, right?
Curious young global people.
That's great. So, Alexandre, we'll come back to you. And Hugh, let's hear about Circus TV.
Circus TV is an on-demand channel. It's been available in Scandinavia for about 3 years. Great British TV is the kind of masthead that we use to describe it. It's top quality British drama available to platforms. We're a B2B operation and we sell to platforms as an on-demand channel who then package it in their various tiers and make it available to their subscribers. Of course, British content is hugely popular in Scandinavia. We subtitle all our content. We have the rights to major British series such as Poldark, Victoria, Line of Duty, those kinds of things, plus a huge range of other content. But the reason I'm here at MIPDoc is because we've just launched a new service, which is a high-end documentary service called Curio, and this is a factual service which we believe is going to fill the gap, because as factual channels have gone down market in the chase for ratings and have sort of put in factual entertainment rather than high-quality factual programs, documentary programs, we've developed an international documentary service called Curio. It's launching this month in Norway and Sweden.
So that will be, again, best of British, or is it globally
No, this is an
sourced?
international service, so we have content here from obviously British distributors, but also from international distributors, German, French, and so on.
Okay, so I meant to just at the beginning introduce myself. In my newsletter, I have a lot of coverage of trends in SVOD, looking at Netflix, Amazon, and niche services. And my newsletter is free, so if you go to documentarytelevision.com, check it out. I also wanted to start with this slide about scale. And I looked at the market cap of Facebook, which is just now entering the video market, developing and commissioning originals, and we're not sure what their model will be yet. But certainly Amazon, you know, it's a 400 billion company, absolutely dwarfs Netflix, but still Netflix is enormous, 50 billion market cap. And look at little Discovery, who we were looking up at just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago as totally dominant in our field. Almost looks like a niche player. So I'm going to ask you, Roger, looking at the scale here and looking at your operation, are you observing a 90-10 rule where most of your royalties, most of your revenues are coming from the 2 big players, Amazon and Netflix, and 10 from all of the others?
Yeah, that's about right. 90-10, as you say, 90% of revenue from those big dominant global players, Netflix and Amazon. But also, you know, as is often the case with big, high-volume distributors like us, 90% of the revenue comes from 10% of the content.
Right. And what kind of content is really working? Can you make a generalization?
It's hard to predict in our model what will be a hit, but broadly speaking, we find that factual documentary content it travels really well. It's relatively easy for us to localize for the Chinese market, for example, or for India, or for European language markets. About 40% of our catalog is factual, mainly documentary films and documentary TV. But I mean, my throwaway line as to what works best for us is any content that deals with what I would call the human vices. So any content that relates to, you know, sex, drugs, alcohol, gambling, crime,
attending
violence. Yeah, it's that you know, rightly or wrongly, that tends to be the content that, if we have to predict, generates the most revenue.
But factual, you said it's 40% of your catalog. Would you categorize it as around about 40% of your revenues too?
Probably a little bit more, probably closer to 50-55%.
So that's really interesting. So it actually outperforms the catalog. The factual, I mean, my takeaway is that factual is really alive in SVOD. That young people, right, because this is a youth-targeted platform, that young people really like factual. And it's not the dead end or the PBS kind of earnest category of programming that it was categorized, you know, 10 years ago, say.
Yeah, young people loves actually factual, but they are looking for different formats. That's why we made the decision to have 5-minute segments, 15-minute segments, because a lot of them are using and playing with the platforms depending on the way they live. That's why you have suddenly, I don't know, Snapchat or a story becoming the new format where you engage with the content. So you need to be aware of that if you want to develop for young people. The way we edit, for example, for the young audience we have is slightly different. So that's why you can have different versions actually of the content. So I would say, yeah, content is still king. Distribution is King Kong because it really is forcing you to adapt to the audience.
But the constraints of the old broadcast model of half hours, hours, and theatrical docs is no longer the case. You can make whatever length works. Is that a fair takeaway?
This is what we are seeing. You know, we own the platform, so we see how the people are acting and playing with it. And actually, one of the big problem with Facebook is people are looking for 3 minutes, 2 minutes segments. Then you have to drive them from the platform to your proposal, and then when they are really engaged, then they begin to watch for, I don't know, 30 minutes or 15 minutes. But it's a slightly different reaction to the traditional, I would say, television. But they love it.
It's great. So Hugh,
Well, I come at this from a slightly different perspective to say, at the moment, what we're finding with the big operators with whom we work, they are having to jettison linear channels. They can no longer afford them. They don't want them anymore. And the fact of the matter is that in America, we know the big pay TV operators are now getting rid of linear channels in order to bring in more on-demand content. And the argument that we make to platform operators, which is why we set up an on-demand channel, SVOD channels, is that if you are going to compete with the global giants like Amazon and Netflix, you've simply got to get into on-demand. And the idea that SVOD is some kind of little separate area that you can sort of think about and mull over is absolutely absurd. I mean, this is the way in which people watch television now. Mm-hmm. This is the way in which everybody soon will be watching television. They don't want to watch adverts. They don't want to watch wait all the time to see the next episode of something. They want it immediately, they want it now, and they want it in the form that they like to watch it. So I think we really have got to rethink the way in which we approach this whole area, really, because we are talking not about the future, we're talking about now, and now is really strengthening all the time.
So thinking about channels first is for really the older or the less technically advanced audience who haven't made the switch to on-demand SVOD type consumption that young people are overwhelmingly making. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that is true. I think obviously the younger generation are leading the switch. I saw a statistic the other day which says that thanks to Netflix and Amazon, well, thanks to Netflix mainly in the UK, the BBC average audience now is over 60. Which was a really terrifying figure, I thought. If it's true, and it seems to be
it's the same in France.
Yeah, the same in France. So,
are you over 60? No.
I won't answer that question.
So, Roger, in terms of do you have any data to share about the youth, the relative youth of the emerging SVOD platforms on your any indications that the appetite for programs expresses young audiences?
I think the average age of subscribers to the big global services, Netflix and Amazon Prime, is actually trending upwards because younger people were by definition the early adopters. So, Amazon Prime and Netflix are now globally, Netflix is already at the 100 million subscriber mark, and Amazon Prime is almost there. So it's definitely not just a millennial audience anymore. It's all age groups, and importantly, across all devices, of course.
So just in terms of this, our key theme here, which is localization and globalization, we don't have Amazon or Netflix, although we just had Amazon on a previous panel, Amazon's head of originals. What information can you share with us about their localization strategy for the major giants?
Amazon super aggressive in their localization, just like Netflix. And Amazon are not just localizing content, they're localizing pricing, which is super smart. So Netflix is basically, between $8 and $12 a month, wherever you are. Netflix India, between $8 and $12 a month. Netflix US, the same in the UK. Whereas Amazon, I think very smartly, has localized its pricing according to average revenues. So, somebody has to pay basically $10 a month for Netflix in India, but right now you can subscribe to Amazon Prime for $7.50 a year. So that is such a radical price differentiation. Plus, with Amazon Prime in India, of course, you're getting free shipping for physical goods. So I'm seeing Amazon getting super aggressive both on localization of content and price localization.
And are they commissioning locally?
Yeah, both of these big players are commissioning. They're doing two things. They're commissioning locally. So, for example, India, both Netflix and Amazon are commissioning essentially Bollywood-type content. But they've both been, I think, pleasantly surprised how well American and European original content travels to India, to Southeast Asia. Neither of these big players have been allowed into China yet, but for sure their American, British, German, French content is traveling well outside of, shall we say, developed first world countries.
Alexandre.
Yeah, I have an example with Amazon. One of our content, the one that was in the clip, Two Black Men a Week, it's about police brutality in the US. Police brutality, and it was produced by a French journalist, and we distributed it on Amazon in the US, on Amazon US. We had something like 15,000 people paying for it, which is very good, if you ask me, because it's also the discoverability of the content on the Amazon platform that is slightly different. With their recommendation engine, if you're looking for something around police brutality on their engine, the whole engine, the library, whatever the books, they can propose you that documentary. So you can discover something without having, let's say, the traditional exposure on an home page, because it's really the content that is at the center of the offer. And it gives you an idea about what will happen in the future with all the data-minded approach that you can have to documentary. You looking for something around Versailles, you can have the book, but you can also have a documentary, or you can also have a fiction.
But aren't you just a second though, Hugh, aren't you at a disadvantage as a small local niche service in an Amazon search environment where they just have such enormous data, enormous resources?
Actually, that's why we tested it, because some of the content we produce, we own, we try. So that content was good also because it was appealing for an American audience. Going back to your point, yes, there's a question about that, but on the other way, what we are selling is also something like a French touch. We know we are niche. We know that some of the people, we have some French expats, for example, at the moment, because the signal at the moment is not geo-localized. So the people who speak French or read French can have access to it globally. So we have some subscribers in Dubai, because you have a lot of French people there, but you have also people who are subscribers in the US because they speak French. So we have an advantage. We have this French-speaking barrier. But then after it's a discussion with different distributors, and we are discussing with cable operators at the moment, with satellite operators, who are interested in to differentiate. Because the problem against the big platforms for the other players is that they need to differentiate, they need brands. And that's why we build this community, because we want to build something different than a pure algorithmically led platform.
That's a really interesting solution. Hugh?
Well, I just wanted to follow up on what Roger was saying about localization, which of course is key to helping get audiences. But the fact of the matter is that the growth of SVOD and the growth of VOD generally and of the internet means that content travels much better. And the fact is that you can now use international content in far more places and in far more widely than you ever could before. In the UK, watching a French television series 5 years ago was unthinkable. Now they're all over the place. Watching a German TV series would have been unthinkable. Now they're really quite easily available, not only on Netflix and Amazon, but on the main channels as well, who are beginning to get into this business. And the fact of the matter is that on-demand television encourages people to look further for what they want to watch, and encourages them to watch and acquire content and get used to content that they weren't used to before. So although localization is important, what it's actually also doing is making content more global and making it much more travelable, for want of a better phrase, across the world.
So Netflix and Amazon have they have on their EPG the feature of prompting you that if you liked such and such, they recommend another program like that. Do you have those resources for your niche service? Are you at a disadvantage by not having those kind of data?
We can do that. I mean, it really depends on how sophisticated, because we're in the hands of the platform operators, and some of the platform operators, frankly, do not have on-demand services or on-demand resources that are as sophisticated as Amazon's and Netflix, although they hopefully will get there. Some of them can do that, and can do recommendations, and we encourage them to do that, and we encourage them through the marketing to make sure that the algorithms are working in that way. I would say that they're not up to speed. A lot of them are not up to speed in the same way as Amazon and Netflix are with that kind of ability to signal to the audience what they ought to be watching.
Well, it depends on the sophistication of the set-top box.
Exactly right. So
and Comcast, for instance, in the States have enormous resources in this way, and they're the market leader.
Exactly, and the TiVo box, can do so much, but it's not as sophisticated as the over the top service.
So we can expect that kind of searchability and prompting will become universal and not just the property of Amazon and Netflix.
Absolutely. It goes hand in glove with the way in which you watch on-demand television.
Right, Alexandre.
Yeah, we think that editorial can make a huge difference. When we engage, because we have those teams, for example, in India, it's true that there are subjects that are really relevant to India. Only an Indian team or an Indian-led team can identify and produce and propose to their audience. So that's why ultimately we think we'll have something like, I don't know how to call it, Spicee India, with a mix of what we propose and some original content coming from people in the field. And I think at the end of the day, it's one of the challenges the platforms will have to face, because they can, let's say, curate, have 10% of the best, but it's impossible for them to fight against everyone globally. It's just impossible. So one of their strategy and tactics is to commission, but they can't commission everything. And if you have smart players or people who have a real understanding of what's good for their market, we think that there's room for niche, there's room for quality and brands that are able to propose original content. Think about what The Guardian is doing, for example, with their documentaries on their page. Yeah. You can imagine that press, players, whatever, people who have a great existing brand can react and re-identify or localize their point of view.
So, Roger, you said you have a catalogue of 15,000 titles, more or less. What are the various levels of localization that you provide for your global customers?
It kind of depends on the underlying content owner. So if it's a smart documentary producer who puts their documentary film in the Kinonation catalog, if it's let's say a German language documentary, then if that producer is smart, they'll give us localized assets, usually meaning subtitles, in multiple languages. That's the way it makes it easiest for us to sell. And localization, of course, does not just mean subtitles or dubbing. It also means that the title and the poster art and the description all needs to be localized.
And the producer needs to do that?
Yeah, either the producer or the distributor, if it's from a catalog or a sales agent. And oftentimes the operator or the VOD platform will do the localization. So, for example, we've licensed a couple thousand documentaries to China Mobile, which is the biggest telecoms company in the world, 825 million subscribers. They're doing all of the localization. So we simply give them English language subtitles for those thousands of documentaries, and then they localize it in Chinese.
So is China for you a high opportunity market, or is it a really difficult one to crack? Or both?
It's both. It's definitely both. I mean, it's a huge opportunity, obviously, because of size, and additionally because the Chinese government has excluded Netflix and Amazon Video. So Amazon is in China very active in terms of selling physical stuff. So you can buy a coffee maker on Amazon China, but you cannot watch Amazon Prime Video, and Netflix have essentially given up in China, according to their CEO. So a huge opportunity for us. We've got deals with 4 big media companies there, but it isn't easy. We've got an office in China, we've got sales and ops people, but it's very bureaucratic and it's very inconsistent in how the rules are applied.
And what are the key genres? Because there's so much sensitivity around social issues and in China and political issues. What are the key genres that are working there in SVOD?
Well, documentary and other factuals working great. We just have to be careful to exclude sensitive content. So excluding, broadly speaking, means nothing political, unless it's, for example, a documentary that's anti-US. For example, Alexandre's documentary about police brutality in the US would be very much welcomed in China. So nothing political, minimal drug use and minimal sex. Chinese censors don't really care about violence.
A lot of wildlife, a lot of travel, a lot of leisure.
Yeah, definitely. Wildlife, kids animation shows, travel, food, all of those categories, they travel well because they're very easy to localize and they are non-controversial.
Let's jump to you, Hugh. What kind of localization do you provide?
Well, we subtitle all our content, obviously, for the Nordic region. And when we launch in Germany, everything will be dubbed, which is for drama, is a very, very expensive and cumbersome process. But frankly, for the German market at the moment, we have to do that. I was hearing earlier that Amazon decided to try and put undubbed content onto their German service, and it fell over. It just didn't work. It bombed. So that's what you have to do. I mean, that is the extent of the localization that we do. As I said earlier, I mean, we are acquiring international content in that sense. So what we need to do is to make it available in a language that people can understand, and that's the localization that we carry.
So I'm going to ask you for a comment, Alexandre, but we're open for Q&A. We've got 8 minutes and 22 seconds left. So if anyone has a question, raise your hand and then introduce yourself after Alexandre's comment by your name and where you're from. We'd be delighted to answer your questions. Otherwise, we'll continue our discussion. So, Alexandre.
We believe that the most important part of localization will be probably around communities. Since we launched in France, we realized every week we had people proposing subjects we didn't have in mind. That's why we built this community called Spicers, with crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. And we think that in the future it will be probably one of the most important parts, especially for localization, because you can imagine to have Spicee in Thailand. We still have an editorial control on it, so it's not like a YouTube or a Vimeo offer. It's editorialized, it's picked by an editor, but we are proposing to people an exposure they didn't have before, precisely because it's in an environment of a premium content. And this is extremely attractive for local players. When I was in Thailand, I showed it to some operators, and they really loved the idea because it's giving something against called differentiation. And we think that global is great, but then you need something to make a difference locally. Mm-hmm. That's why people will pay for it.
And you think that building this community is a very important driver?
It's very important because then you can build a community in the social networks, in Facebook, for example, and it's also a marketing tool, because they are the ones talking about the content in a very close way, because they know what's in it and they are proposing their own thing.
Really an interesting perspective. Does anyone have a question here? Hands up. We have one here. Thank you.
Hello. Oh my God. Hi, I'm Nina Podolska. I'm from Los Angeles, and I have some experience working with Kinonation. We had some colorized films that you distributed for us for Hulu, and I have a question about promotion, because I remember us as producers, we delivered, I mean, maybe that wasn't the most amazing content, but I know that I can deliver like a good film, and I can give it to whomever, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, but we had no audience because there was no promotion made for it. And then I know our competitor did the Winter on Fire documentary for Netflix, and they've invested heavily in promotion of it. So who does this, the P&A budget, how does it work?
Good question. That's a good question. Which of the platforms is, I guess, more discriminating and therefore more capable of promoting a film?
Marketing is, without question, the biggest challenge for us as a company. Perfect technical execution by us means that a documentary or movies like yours, Nina, flow into our system and then flow out very quickly and efficiently to 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 platforms around the world. But the problem with video on demand for most content owners is that their content, just because it's live on iTunes or Hulu or Amazon or wherever, It's one of tens of thousands of titles, and of course doesn't mean it will be watched. And that's why what Alexandre is saying about community is so mission critical. So, Amazon Video, for example, in the US has 160,000 titles right now. And it's incredibly easy for content, for individual documentary or other titles to get lost in the mix. So promotion is the #1 challenge, I would say, for the underlying content owner in that scenario.
But that's the producer's responsibility, not yours.
With our business model, it is definitely the producer's responsibility because we're so high volume. We'll initially pitch it to a platform like Hulu, and they'll make a select or decline decision. And after that, it is their decision as to how much they promote it, just like a TV channel would make a decision as to how much to promote content. And of course, it's the responsibility of the underlying content owner to try to do as much social and other promotion as possible.
So what's the success rate just quickly, with Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix? Give us a range if you pitch a quality project.
It's a great question. Amazon is 100% success because Amazon very explicitly do not curate. They don't make a select or decline decision. They take everything, as long as it meets their technical specifications and it's not pornography. So it's 100% with Amazon. It's about 15 to 20% with Hulu, so they are curating quite aggressively. And then with Netflix, because their business model means that they are paying substantial flat fees, it's a relatively high risk for Netflix to say yes to a film or a TV show. So if we're pitching them 20 factual or documentary movies this month, I'd be pretty pleased if Netflix take 2 of them. So a very low hit rate at Netflix.
That's great. Good. Hugh?
Well, I agree. Marketing, one of the reasons we haven't gone over the top with our service is that the marketing spend for an over-the-top service is so huge that we think it's beyond our reach. So we haven't tried to do that. And we're very, very assiduous in following up with the platform operators upon whom we depend for marketing to make sure that they understand our content and are using all kind of marketing avenues that are available to promote it. Because without the really strong marketing, on-demand content just doesn't travel.
In the old days in HBO, they had a rule called $1 in content, $1 in marketing. It was a long time ago, but it gives you an idea of the necessity, if you have a content, especially if it is exclusive or different, to promote it or to use every tools to make it discoverable. Then you have search engines, algorithms, and all the communities around. But it's, to me, the new type of role a producer must have. Not only produce something, but think about the life of this brand, and I say a brand, after the first, let's say, broadcast. Actually, it's better to work on it before. Then you create a title, but it's a brand in the user's eyes and the experience, and then it can live very long time. This metadata associated to content in Amazon is creating, I would say, an afterlife for some content because they are discoverable.
So the producer, you provide marketing dollars, but you expect your producers to come with marketing resources.
Yeah,
too,
when we commission something, we think about let's say, the impact of an experience and a brand. And sometimes we have been very successful because the producer associated the community, because there was a famous guy, world champion of motocross. He had a huge community and they associated and they created so much noise around the content that we just had to follow. And it was a common success for both of us.
So we've got 14 seconds to go. I'm going to ask each of you, is there a future for localization of SVOD content?
Well, the quick answer has to be yes, of course there is, because there's a future for SVOD content, and that's how people are going to be watching content from now on. And they're going to want local content as well as international content, so yes.
Alexandre?
Absolutely yes, but we have to be extremely humble because we don't know exactly how it works.
Good answer, I like that too. Roger?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. And we are rapidly moving to a world where we will have every movie ever made available in every language to everybody on the planet. That's coming soon.
So a final plug, read about it in my free newsletter, documentarytelevision.com. Thank you, panelists. That was really exciting, very interesting conversation. Thank you.